Try that, shall we? I'll start again. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Council this evening. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, so we're extending our welcome to those who are joining us online. Some housekeeping. If you wish to speak, please indicate that you wish to do so through myself or through off again. There we go. Please also, if you can, stand when addressing the Council. Ironically, to enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that it has done so. Please also remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking. It's particularly important that all members use their microphones so that the audio can be picked up on the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand point.
Testing.
Really quickly, do we have any apologies this evening?
I'll attempt, Chairman, to. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Clark, Councillor Welton, Golson, Banks, Ferguson, and Corney, and I have apologies from Councillor Tevelin, who's late. Should be joining us.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so who's old enough to remember Norman Collier? Even from outside of our area, either as visitors or as residents, which affords the opportunity for both sides to learn and sometimes adopt each other's traditions. Some traditions might already be here, might already be part of everyday life, whilst others, whilst shared, may perhaps differ in interpretation or have an origin which is open to debate. Growing up in Huntingdonshire in the 1960s and 70s, Americans and their traditions became very much part of my life and the life of so many others. Long before decorating houses at Christmas became a tradition in the UK, like we see today, Huntingdonshire residents could just turn up at the main gate at RAF Falconbury, imagine that, and drive round a set route and look and wonder and excitement at the lights on the base houses, so much in contrast to what we had at home. And long before seatbelts in cars became a thing, let alone compulsory, us children would scramble around on the back seat of the family car to get a good look at displays, which was so much a traditional part of American Christmases, but very much a novelty for us. Friends of mum and dad, who were members of the visiting US forces, became honorary uncles and aunts. And that's a tradition I'm pleased to say continued when my own children came along in the early 90s. And it wasn't until the mid-90s, though, that I even thought about why or when the tradition of candy canes appeared at Christmas. And it took some American friends from RAF Falconbury at my home church to introduce me and others in the congregation to the legends surrounding this unusually shaped piece of confectionery. Although there's some debate about the origin of the candy cane, especially around whether it was created specifically to emphasize a Christian message, or whether it was adapted for that use afterwards, the symbolism of it remains pretty much the same. The white symbolizes the purity of Christ and the virgin birth. with the hardness of the cane symbolic of the rock on which the Christian church is formed. The thin wrist straps are said to symbolise the Holy Trinity, or the lashes Christ received before his crucifixion, and by which he offers healing, or perhaps even both. And the thick red stripe represents the blood he shed as he took on the sins of the world 30-odd years later. The peppermint flavour is said to represent the hyssop plant, used for purification in biblical times, whilst the shape of the candy cane represents the crook of the Good Shepherd, or turn the other way around, the journey in Jesus. In a modern-day twist on a legend which may have started in Europe before being exported to
Thank you, Councillor Alban. That was really insightful and very, very poignant. So thank you very much. Item 2, minutes. This is to get agreement that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 12th of October 2022 is a correct record and therefore will be signed if everyone is in agreement. Moving on to item number 3, members' interests. Before I ask for interests from other members, I will be declaring an interest. As an employee of the Meridian Trust, I'll be leaving the meeting during item 5. Are there any other interests that members would like to declare in relation to any agenda items this evening? Thank you. Item number 4, Chair and Vice Chair's engagements and announcements. I'm sure current and former members will join me in acknowledging the recent passing of former District Councillor Derek Giles. Derek retired as a District Councillor in May 2022 after 27 years as a Ward Councillor for the former St Neots Eton Soken Ward and latterly the St Neots Etons Ward.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Giles, Derek, was a very long-serving councillor, as you've already heard, and we bestowed upon him the highest honour that this district council can bestow as an alderman. He spoke so passionately about his community and wasn't one to shy away from saying what he thought needed saying. Indeed, he reminded us on the day that he received his alderman scroll that we needed to try and do a better job because he felt that needed said. And we're all here trying to do a better job and remembering Derek's wise words. We knew Derek wasn't in good health, but it was still a surprise when he decided not to stand for district, particularly after so many years of long service. His network of friendships across this chamber meant we had regular updates on how he was doing. There was always an optimism and there was plenty of humour. He was well liked and is much missed. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to offer his wife, our former colleague, Sandy Giles, and their family our deepest sympathy and sincerest condolences. I also want to put on public record our thanks for his service to the residents and to all those in Huntingdonshire as a member of this council. Councillor Derek Giles, Honorary Alderman of Huntingdonshire.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to say a few words on behalf of my group, if I can. And I'd like to firstly agree and extend our condolences to Councillor Giles's family. We are obviously thinking a lot of them at this particular time, especially as we run up to Christmas. And as Councillor Comboy has said, whilst we have known for a while that Derek was unwell, it's always sad when that finally happens. And I was very pleased that Councillor Andy Jennings was able to represent my group at Derek's funeral, which I'm told was very Derek. And I think that's a super compliment to the man. And Sarah's already said about how much we enjoyed him here receiving his scroll. Very often I've seen those just become sort of, thank you very much for making me an honorary alderman or alder person of the district. Really appreciated being here, enjoyed my time here. Hope you're all doing very well. Thank you very much. And of course, Derek came in here and in his true style sort of decided to open up with two barrels about cabinet and committees and various things like that. And I really appreciated that. It was very Derek in terms of doing that. And it's the long service that Sarah has, that Sarah's mentioned. Derek, I knew Derek really mostly as a Liberal Democrat, although I think he had a pretty independent streak as a Liberal Democrat, and obviously more latterly as an independent. And because we are we were from slightly different sides of the chamber. One or two of my group might have thought, well, he's just become an independent in order to get elected. But even if that was true, that's a jolly noble thing, because it was the passion to serve his community that drove him to want to be here, to want to be in the fulcrum of where decisions locally were being made. And that is something that I think really marks him out as being a proper servant, a proper public servant of the people of Huntingdonshire. So, Sandy and family, I hope you're hearing these words from various councillors and are very proud of the person that Derek was this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo the very, I thought, excellent comments from Councillor Conway and Councillor Gray just now. I attended Derek's funeral along with Councillor Jennings and Councillor Taylor. And it was the only funeral I've been to where the person we were sending off had the first word and the last word. It was remarkable. Lisa and Joe were also in attendance. We had a video presentation from Derek, as Councillor Gray said. It was very Derek. He was unique. Derek was a magnificent servant over many years. I think he was first elected here in 1991. And I think it was great that we were able to make him an honorary alderman back in the summer. I know that meant a great deal to him. He was never shy in giving me advice about how to do things, whether I wanted it or not. He was always very forthcoming and telling me what I should and shouldn't do, and putting Neats at the centre of the universe. But I know that Sandy and the family really appreciate the tributes that the county council have made, and indeed this council. It means a lot to them. And I'll just sign off by a tribute that was made, and Councillor Gray will appreciate this, to the legendary Liverpool football manager Bill Shankly. It says on his statue, "He made the people happy," and I think that also applies to Derek. Thank you.
Pass it to my husband. Thank you.
Yeah, I think someone's already done a tribute to him. So yeah, Simon and I first met Derek when he knocked on our door canvassing many years ago, and he came back the next day and got me to sign up. And got me to stand for district and town council. We did a lot together in knocking on doors, etc. But we even travelled to Stolberg in Germany as part of the Twin Association. And Derek was always raising money for something or other. And at that point, he was raising funds for the Mayor's charity. And he was, I think if I remember rightly, he was getting people to throw hoops over bottles of beer to raise money. But as I said, he was always raising money. He managed to get me to pay for a couple of shillings from Uganda to raise money for a toilet over there. And even on his funeral, he was raising money. We wouldn't have expected anything less from Derek, but he was asking for money for Sarcoma UK, which ultimately took his life. Derek was really well known in the Eatons, as was Sandy. And as he was mentioned earlier, he represented St Neots, the Eatons, Eaton Soaking in particular, but he also represented Amesbury as county councillor at one point when it was amalgamated. And him and along with Steve van der Kerkhoff, they represented it. And unfortunately, Steve also passed away from a tumour. Derek was always seen on May Day down at the Eatons on the Eaton Green, usually on a barbecue. He did a good barbecue, and he actually taught me things about barbecues as a chef, trained chef. It was something he did know how to do a barbie, but he also could be seen in the Pie Tea or one of the local pubs. Strangely, I was in Yorkshire once on holiday with someone and some friends, and I went to book a table in a pub. And I thought I was hallucinating because there's Derek sitting in the pub holding a beer. And I thought I was going mad. I've got to give up politics, something. But yeah, there was Derek. Just happened as he was on holiday up in Yorkshire too. Derek and Sandy were the founding members of SNIG and the St Neots Independent Group. And it adopted lilac as that was Derek's favourite colour, as we can all know from his funeral. I'm very grateful to Derek for teaching me about how to fight for elections, how to write election leaflets, but also how to use his printer, which is a very complex machine, and I spent hours on the phone with him trying to work that out, but also how to write leaflets. So I'll be ever grateful for Derek for everything he's taught me. And also, I'd just like to say Derek was larger than life. He was one of life's characters, and he will he'll be sadly missed, but never forgotten, I don't think. Thank you.
And of course, I'd like to extend the council's thoughts to Sandy and my friends at this time. Turning to the list of engagements, which is page 15 of your agenda, there is an additional event which my Vice Chair attended to one of the warm spaces which has opened in Hosen, which he attended on Tuesday, so we will get that. So we'll just take this opportunity to engage with everyone, to remind you that there is a carol service on Monday, which is being held at St Mary's Church here in Huntingdon at 6 p.m, which we are extending an invite to everybody, and it would be really lovely to see everybody there. Item number 5, in accordance with the interest that I've already declared, under item 3 of the agenda, I will now be handing over to my Vice Chair to chair this item, and I'll be leaving the room. In accordance with the Council's procedure rules dealing with these matters,
I would now like to invite Miss Medlock to present a petition regarding the closure of Sawtry swimming pool. And I would also like to thank him for joining us this evening. Following the presentation of the petition, there will be an opportunity for district councillors to ask questions.
Well, good evening, everybody, and I'd like to thank everybody for hearing our petition regarding the sad closure of Sawtry Swimming Pool. So why are we petitioning the Huntingdon District Council? Because all we hear from councillors is that it's the Meridian Trust. It's their issue, not yours. And yes, you're right. It is a trust issue, but this council are responsible for where we are now. And all you're doing is to abdicate your responsibility on this matter. I'll give you two reasons why we're petitioning you. Firstly, how can we petition the trust when they were not engaged with Sawtry residents? It's disgraceful. We have tried to get an open meeting with our parish council, but have been told they refuse point blank to meet us. All they want to do is hide behind press releases with potential unsubstantiated numbers. There is no data that we can see to back up the numbers they are quoting. They may be accurate, but how do we know without dialogue? We feel they have failed the people of Sawtry and the council with the way that they've run our leisure centre, particularly the pool. But we'll not stand up to being asked questions about this. Surely this council could not be happy with the way that their appointed contractor is dealing with this issue. Secondly, and the reason we're petitioning the council is because the council, whoever was in charge at the time, are responsible for giving away our leisure facility, including the pool, which ended up at the Meridian Trust. We feel the trust only wanted the school academy contract and not the leisure centre, as they have little or no experience in running them. We all know the first thing the trust did was to subcontract it to Stevenage Leisure, who sadly had to pull out when COVID hit, so they were forced to try and run it. The trust spent money on a facelift. They've removed walls, new changing rooms, extra gym equipment, new signage, etc. Must have cost hundreds of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, yes, a lot of money. It did not look at more urgent items, such as the pump servicing and possible renewable energy options. The servicing of the pump room would cost around £40,000. That would have kept the pool running for another 10 years. To install solar panels would also cost about another £60,000. I'm told there is a solar thermal air sourcing heating option, which can be reviewed under a spend to save payback investment. This would have taken the heating our pool off grid and therefore not influenced by the energy crisis we're all facing today. This council spent over £2.6 million worth of taxpayers' money since the build in 1992. And then in 2019, a further £80,000 of taxpayers' money was given away when it was transferred to the trust. I understand at a meeting in September between One Leisure and the trust that it was confirmed that there was money had been spent in the fitness room and they had received significant capital investment, but the plant room, including pool filters, heating, circulation pumps, had not been maintained, which had caused operational implications. By then, it's too late. So let's be honest, the trust may be good at running schools, I don't know, but certainly not leisure centres. So what guarantees will we have that they will continue to run their leisure centre if it starts to lose money due to memberships falling away as the pool isn't an option anymore? Would it revert back to the council? Or could they just close the facility and build more classrooms to accommodate the ever-increasing number of children attending our schools? Is there an asset transfer agreement in place? If so, what does that agreement say? To my mind, swimming is one of life's essential skills to help protect everyone from getting into trouble around water. The Department of Education stipulates that part of the school curriculum is that every primary school child should be able to swim 25 metres unaided before they leave primary school. So how's that going to be achieved in Sawtry? Or don't we count? What is going to be done to the children of Sawtry to get them swimming? What will Ofgem do when this criteria isn't achieved? Ironically, my stepdaughter went to see my granddaughter's new primary school only a few days ago. One of the trust employees was still promoting health and leisure, including swimming. How's this going to be done? How do you expect families living on the breadline who cannot afford to run a car to get their children to swim? Huntingdon One Leisure is the closest to Sawtry, and our last bus home is 4:45. Most hard-working families are still at work then. Our pool isn't just for Sawtry residents either. It's also used by other villagers close by. And what about our residents who need a swimming pool for rehabilitation from operations, to help in their general well-being and for their general good mental health? I see Huntingdon District Council have a Healthy You campaign via your active lifestyle team. Swimming high on the agenda. Clearly, this is only aimed at people who can access a pool, so clearly it doesn't include Sawtry residents. I also watched with interest the council meeting the 3rd of November. The discussions regarding an 8.7% price increase to all One Leisure sites. If I've understood the figures correctly, between 24 and 2027, there will still be a deficit of around 400,000. Can you imagine the fury of us in Sawtry now knowing that part of our council tax money will go towards the upkeep and bankrolling of these One Leisure sites around the county when our pool is being closed? So in conclusion, where do we go from here? Well, I urge this council to take back our leisure centre and run it again, or at least subcontract it to a body whose expertise is running leisure centres and pools. Will you be lobbying our local MP, looking for support from government? Has anybody looked at this solar thermal air source heating option? What happened to all the Section 106 money you get from developers? And let's be honest, Sawtry has seen more than their fair share of development over the years, but we don't get a lot of reinvestment. There does appear to be some help out there, but we do not hear anything from anyone trying to do anything about this mess. Just close our pool, and which Sawtry residents are totally against. Thank you for listening.
Do any members here have any questions, Mr. Medlock?
It's not so much a question, it's just a point of clarity. Sorry, is that on? Yeah. It's just that you mentioned that there would still be a 300k deficit. There would be without the price increase. Just to clarify that. Thank you.
There was no plan B, so membership reduced. You could still be having a deficit.
I can talk about this, but it's actually questions to yourself. So I'm quite happy to. I'm quite happy to, but I was only going to thank Mr. Medlock. Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. You'd said about the conversations you've tried to have with the trust. I wondered if you might give us a sense of how that's worked in terms of how many times you've made an approach. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, so I emailed the parish council and asked for an open meeting, and the reply I got back was they had tried to contact the trust, but they had refused point blank. So my contact was through the parish council because I wanted an open meeting. I wanted the parishes of Sawtry to have their say to the trust, but unless they're going to change their mind, so far they're running away.
Thank you, Mr. Medlock. Can I just ask? I know you're saying you feel like the academy are running away. Do you know whether they have looked for another contractor like Stevenage Leisure to take this over?
I honestly don't know. I wouldn't know if they won't talk to us.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Medlock, for coming along this evening and also the residents who had also turned up on a cold winter's night, and it's not difficult to get here from Sawtry on the buses. So thank you very much. The recent announcement from Meridian Trust that the pool in Sawtry is going to close is a major blow to our community. Not having a pool in Sawtry and expecting families with already limited budgets to travel on non-existent buses seems very isolationist. In 1993, this council invested £629,000 to construct the gym and swimming pool in the centre, which is the heart of our community. Since then, a huge amount of taxpayers' money has been invested into the facility. My constituents, as Mr. Medlock has outlined, are very concerned about this and the population growth in the village and how our children in Sawtry and the surrounding villages will be able to learn to swim, which, as we all know, is a crucial and a very important life skill. When this council decided to hand over the responsibility of the leisure centre in Sawtry to the trust, the landscape was very, very different. It was before COVID in 2019, and it was deemed at that time that it was the best option for this council to save the leisure facility and had cross-party support through the scrutiny process. And I also recall an independent councillor in that scrutiny process asking HDC, will they have the first option to take it back if it didn't work? And as I recall, and I've checked the minutes because it was a closed confidential meeting, that this was the case. Well, here we are a few years later, having come through COVID, pandemic and utility crisis, which saw the trust struggling to keep its head above water. And sadly, you've heard the reasons why it's not been successful. And the question remains, what will HDC do? It seems to me that the council administration are simply walking away and abdicating the responsibility. That's fine, but as you've heard from the residents tonight, they want to understand the value for money of their council tax, how it's being spent and why it's being spent on other facilities in the district and not for the residents of Sawtry and the surrounding villages. It is absolute fantasy if anyone in this room thinks that getting a bus to Huntingdon or Peterborough will be sufficient to take children to a swimming pool where they can learn this important life skill. Yes, some parents will have access to cars, but not where everybody in our community has that blessing. And I have a major fear, based on my past professional policing experience, that if you don't allow young people to have access to swimming pools or safe areas to swim, they will explore and seek dangerous areas like dikes and ponds to swim in. And I don't need to tell you about the implications and the risk factors that involves. This is about political choices on how this council spends its money, and it's down to the administration to decide whether they want to try and support the residents of Sawtry and the surrounding villages, and how they're going to interact with Meridian Trust to get our pool back open, which is the signals that we're sort of hearing from the Meridian Trust that they want to look to explore this. Sawtry residents, and I'm only echoing what people are telling me, that they're fed up of paying ever increasing council tax, and we appear to be losing vital infrastructure like swimming pools, buses, to name a couple, and this seems very, very unfair to the residents of Sawtry and our surrounding villages, which will lead to more rural isolation. Sawtry Swimming Pool has been a key piece of our infrastructure for the last 60 years. So I'm asking the portfolio holder and the leader of the council to reassure my residents that HDC will revisit this issue as we move into the spring and support the residents and Meridian Trust to open the swimming pool again and explore this when there is a better financial picture. In particular, I'm referring to the utility costs that we're all aware of. So my question is, how are you going to help us take this forward in the spring? Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Larkin was first.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. And again, thank you very much, Kevin, and to all the Sawtry residents that turned up tonight, and to all those that signed the petition as well. I do believe that we had, was it 1,400 signatures in the end, which Doesn't happen very often for a petition. You look at the ones online, some of the big national ones, sometimes they don't reach 1,400. So having so many people within the village of Sawtry feel so passionately about our swimming pool and trying to keep it open, especially for the kids of the village, because those are the ones that use it more often than anybody else. I grew up in the village. I learned to swim in that pool, and I use that pool every week, if not twice a week. If it wasn't for that pool, I would be doing as Councillor Bywater just suggested, trying to find a local ditch or river or pond to try and learn to swim. And I bet that wouldn't have gone very well. Especially around our area here, a lot of fatalities in some of the rivers around St Neots. So I think it is important that we do teach our kids how to swim. And it's facilities like this that aid us in doing that. Councillor Bywater just mentioned about the amount of money that's been spent on the facility. I know over the lifetime of the facility, this council has spent capital of over £2 million. That's not including the £600,000 that was used to build the building in the first place. Are we as a council happy to just let that amount of money disappear, see that facility go away, when we've got an opportunity today to try and save it? We've also touched on having to go elsewhere, go to Peterborough or Huntingdon. Most of you will be well aware of the bus cuts from Stagecoach, including the 904 bus in Sawtry, that is woeful at best. At least one bus a day tends to be cancelled at the moment, and the latest bus to come into the village is at 4:45. Most people, when they come home from work, don't come home until after that time, so they wouldn't have the opportunity to use the leisure centres. I just want to touch on something that Mr. Medlock said about reaching out to Meridian Trust. So at the time when I was on the parish council, I personally reached out to the Meridian Trust trying to hold a public meeting, and they were completely against doing so. They didn't want to have any form of meeting either with the parish council or with the public. So I just wanted to say that for Councillor Conboy as he asked the question. I do just want to say and just repeat again what Councillor Bywater said. The residents of Sawtry are very fed up paying these ever increasing council tax bills year on year and seeing more and more of our facilities disappear. I'm sure that your residents would be the same if this was happening to you. So I would urge you to put pressure where you can to ensure that if we can't save the swimming pool today, that we work in the spring to try and reopen the pool in one way or another. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Orban, would you still like to speak?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Of course, as Mr. Medlock and Councillor Bywater and Councillor Martin have pointed out, this isn't just an issue for Sawtry, although Sawtry is obviously most immediately affected. The closure of this pool is also an issue for residents in the Stilton, Folkesworth and Washingley ward, which Councillor Butell and I represent. Stilton, Folkesworth, Home, the Giddings are affected, but most immediately, outside of Sawtry, it's Glatton and Conington. For more than 20 years, Huntingdonshire District Council has either provided the pool at Sawtry for Sawtry residents and the residents of northwest Huntingdonshire directly, or via assistance of a third party, most recently the Academy Trust. The Hunts DC element of council tax is the same for a resident who still has a public pool within easy reach, as it is for the resident whose pool is about to close. And it's not like the residents want something they haven't got. They'll just quite like to keep what they have got. Finally, Chair, without going over the points that have already been raised about child safety and the importance of learning to swim, that's been well emphasised. I'd like to look at the economic aspect of this. Without a pool in Sawtry, there's one less reason to visit the leisure centre and one less reason to visit the village itself or others nearby it. Now, some people might choose to go to Ramsey One Leisure or Huntingdon One Leisure or St Ives One Leisure. But don't forget, for those of us that live in northwest Huntingdonshire and northwest Cambridgeshire, Peterborough City Council's Vivacity offerings are only a few miles away, the nearest being in Hampton and the Ortons, and with other attractions close to those leisure centres, the potential to spend extra money in the Huntingdonshire economy might be lost. £1 in Peterborough's pocket, or one in Huntingdonshire's hands? I know which I prefer.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Conboy.
Chair, I'm happy to respond if we've sort of finished, thank you, if we finish most of the debate, because there was a question put to me as leader. So if that suits everybody. So I've listened to the passion and the commitment, and I appreciate the passion and the commitment for all those who've signed this petition. I'm not proposing that we make a decision tonight. I hear strongly that there is a desire to meet with the Trust, and I'm disappointed that that hasn't been met with an offer to meet. I think that might be our first starting point, because until we understand what their thinking is, it's very difficult to know what the options are, because it is their asset. So we need to understand where their thinking is and to see if there is anything we might reasonably do to persuade them to look differently and to understand the challenges they're facing. I don't know whether this is simply an economic issue or whether there are other elements that they are worrying about. So what I think I would like to do, having not already discussed this with my group, knowing we had a petition this evening, is I think I'd like to offer that we will work with you to talk with the Trust to see if we can have a conversation. I would suggest the first starting point is a conversation in private before we meet to a public meeting, simply to understand the Trust's thoughts, what they're dealing with, and then to understand where that might take us. I think that once we've done that, we will then be able to come back and look at what the options might be. I want to be clear. I'm not sure whether we can solve it in the way that you've asked us to solve it tonight, but I think until we start that dialogue, we can't be certain exactly where the schools and the Academy's Trust thinking is. So if it's okay with you as a petitioner on behalf of those that you're representing, and if it's okay on behalf of the councillors who've spoken so passionately, I think that's possibly a good starting point and one that we would be happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Conboy. I would now like to pause briefly to allow any petitioners the opportunity to leave the Civic Suite if they wish to do so. You may stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now call the chair back, please. Thank you. Looking hopeful.
Okay, moving on to item number 6, questions from members of the public. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 10.1, there is now the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions to the Executive Leader or members of the Cabinet. Questions must have been received 5 days prior to the meeting. And can I ask the Monitoring Officer whether any questions have been received?
No questions received, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 7, briefing from Cambridgeshire Constabulary. We are fortunate to have Chief Inspector Paul Rogerson from Cambridgeshire Constabulary with us this evening to address the Council and share a presentation on community policing.
It's always good to start with backup, isn't it? Good evening. Thank you very much indeed for having me. My name is Paul Rogerson. I'm a Chief Inspector with Cambridgeshire Police, and I work specifically in an area we call Southern Division, which comprises of Huntingdonshire, South Cambridgeshire, East Cambs, and also Cambridge City. Um, so I don't know who I'm queuing for to move the slides on, but if you want to just move us to the 3 points. I've probably been over Swiss in my design of this. I have to keep. There we go. Thank you. So there's a few reasons I'm here tonight, but first I just want to outline that I'm here to open a conversation with you as individuals or as parties or as groups of areas. I know some of you I've spent several hours over a cup of coffee discussing local matters. And there will no doubt there'll be many things that might come to your mind tonight that you'd like to discuss. So the open offer is that I would love to do that. My team would love to do that. And indeed, if you have a bigger question that I can't answer, then I'd like to facilitate the answer to those questions. So the way I'd like to treat this evening is just an opening to that offer. I also appreciate that very much like becoming a police officer, one day you are a member of the public, the next day you are a sworn official, and everybody expects you to have all of the answers, which you won't do. None of us do. So I appreciate that many of you are fairly new to role, and it's become, I believe, a useful kind of custom to try and provide a briefing like this every couple of years, just to acclimatise you to what local policing look like. So I want to talk tonight about who we are and what we do. I want to talk to you about local priorities, which is no doubt something that we could probably each of us spend a couple of hours over a cup of coffee discussing. And then also just kind of outline how you can help, because that's something we often don't get a chance to talk about. So I'm going to start by front loading with just a little bit of information. The way that this has worked in other district areas is that after we've had this session, we have actually run cluster group sessions with parish councils led by district councillors and indeed by some of our county colleagues as well. That can be really useful when we've got clusters of areas that perhaps have a single issue or shared issues they want to discuss. And I'd be more than happy to arrange those as you see fit for some areas or not for others as you wish, just so we can spend a little bit more quality time talking about specific things which might be more difficult in this arena. So if we could have the next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about how we're structured, because it's not always apparent as a local councillor. So the constabulary is split into two basic command units, a south area and a north area. And as I've outlined, you share your area with three other district authorities. Our command is overseen by Superintendent and Adam Gallop. And then there are four chief inspectors that have four areas of business. And my area of business is the most outward facing part of the organisation, the part that we entrust with working with partners. I've given you a bit of an organogram of how we work. So there are three main pillars of policing that most people understand. If you watch any kind of TV show about policing, you'll of course understand that there is a 999, a 24/7 policing function, which we call a response pillar. Everybody tends to understand that there is a crime aspect or a CID pillar to policing. Neighbourhood policing, I would describe really it's the sublime to the ridiculous. It's really everything else. So it would be parking to organised crime groups. And OCG is now a term that I can use without having to explain the acronym now. We've had this new line of duty program. So OCGs to parking, that's the area that I deal with. And I've highlighted for you within that organogram just the three parts of policing that are visible to the public. And I want to start to give you a little bit of a theme and flavour as to not only the complexity of policing, but why we're so often asked, where are all the police officers? Why don't we see anybody? So in orange, you've got my team, the geographic teams, who many of you will know, the Rural Crime Action Team, which is a unique team to our area, our rural area. And then, of course, our 24/7 response teams. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So local policing, that is neighbourhood policing, has a very specific function. We're not a huge team. And if you start to work with your local team around a problem, open a question or a conversation with them, you might start to immediately think these are not big teams that I'm speaking with. The teams that describe themselves as your local bobbies on the beat. And they're not big teams, and they're not big teams because they focus on very specific things, which we'll talk about in a moment. but they are there really to work with all of the statutory partners, all of the voluntary agencies, all of the elected groups of people that we have in our area. And it's really quite a niche function of policing. So your area has three main teams that work geographically, one based around the St Neots hub, one based around the St Ives hub, and then one based around the Huntingdonshire hub. The Huntingdon team, actually shares with into Yaxley as well, and we have several touchdown points that we use in Yaxley, as well as a base in North in Hampton as well to base ourselves from. So the slides will be shared. This will be a useful point. Every year we send out a new list of who the local officers are, so we'll share them with you. So you've got a list of who covers your area. But to make it clear, those small neighbourhood teams are not it. There is a 24/7 function that sits around and behind them. So as we speak currently, there will be a duty officer team, which is a duty inspector, and a duty cadre that are here to answer 999 calls and get to people very, very quickly. They're supported in turn by an investigations team, a road to policing team, a firearms team, and so on and so forth. I also have within my command teams from other districts, and we can brigade and we do brigades. Some of the more recent warrant activity that we've seen in the area as part of Op Hypernova, indeed used all 65 of our resources from across the county to help. And we also have a neighbourhood support team who are a more specialised team who you won't see, who are really designed to be focusing on organised crime and county lines. Next slide, please. If you could just move us through, I think I've over-designed this. Okay, so neighbourhood policing, really for me, it could be described as three things. It's about engagement, problem solving, and targeted activity. And in fact, if you want to have a look, the College of Policing describe those same three things as well as to what neighbourhood policing is about. Engagement for me is where policing starts. It's the part of policing that only my team are involved in. And it's really about understanding what communities need, understanding what communities want, and what is unique to each of your parishes, each of your cluster parishes, areas and towns and villages. And it's about making sure that we understand not just the local and national priorities, so that the district and national priorities for policing, but the local priorities as well. Engagement is where all of policing starts, because it's about providing information. It's about allowing you to have access to police officers to talk through concerns. It's also about allowing you to have influence over what we do, and then for us to take that influence and turn it into actions, and we call that You Said We Did. A lot of that results in either problem solving or targeted activity. So problem solving is what it is, says on the tin. It's tackling the wicked issues, it's tackling the long-term chronic issues, complex issues with communities. And a lot of those things are done with lots of partners that you would expect us to be working with, the district council, the county councils, but others such as housing, schools, social care, early help, drug and alcohol services, health, and the list goes on and on. Targeted activity is that's a little bit more simple to explain. It's really making sure that we're focusing on the right people at the right places at the right times, and that is both about supporting victims as well as targeting offenders. And it's making sure that we have preventative policing around the right types of issues for your areas as well. So I could talk on neighbourhood policing for a couple of hours as just one subject, but that is neighbourhood policing in a nutshell. Next slide, please. So balancing priorities, and this is where one coffee turns to two coffee, perhaps a piece of cake, and maybe even a third coffee when we're talking about local priorities. Now, we'll all understand, I think most of us, the national priorities that the Home Office, our government, are keen that we tackle. Big headlines such as burglary, county lines, modern day slavery, human trafficking. What's in front of you is a combination of the policing plan, so that's the Police and Crime Commissioner's plan, and also the Chief Constable's plan, which leaves us with a number of organisational, operational priorities and values. So our operational priorities up on the top left part of that shape, they are the thematic areas that at the moment are not all that we're focusing on, but the things that are most important to our communities. So things like safeguarding the vulnerable, child exploitation, and tackling serious and organised crime feature. But you'll see things like burglary and car crime don't necessarily feature there individually. Organisational priorities is it's a corporate set of priorities, very similar indeed to those of the I think is it iCare, your own organisational priorities, and then our values. You'd expect us to have values, and then around all of that again are our broader inclusion, diversity, and equality aspirations. So that's where we start. We start with this difficult balance of national strategic priorities, and also looking at what the data tells us are the most important and risky areas for us to be focusing on. So if we can move on, please. So crime trends, in general terms, that's a 5-year trend. And I know that those of you who know how to work with numbers, I could put that line anywhere and get a different type of result. But I think the 5-year trend at the moment is that crime in general, whilst we have peaks and troughs, crime is fairly stable. Over the last year, we have seen obviously a rise in crime trends, as you can see from the graph. It's very difficult to give convincing trends at the moment because the first thing that people throw back at you is lockdown and COVID. And there have been some very genuine gains, some genuine reductions in crime, which are hard to pick out in the midst of COVID. So we can have the next slide. Within that, there are some interesting things statistics that we might want to talk about. Drugs offences. These are monthly averages over this 5 years. So 5 years ago, we were roughly having 16 drugs offences versus 50 a month. Now, in some regards, that's disappointing because we're finding people with more drugs. But it does represent a national shift towards tackling drugs and serious violence. We know the data shows us, the research shows us that drugs underpin most of our serious violence problems, not just within Huntingdonshire, but nationally. So actually an increase in drugs offences is an increase in people that are being searched, an increase in people that are being found with drugs and prosecuted. So it's a disappointing number to see go up, but it's also a indication to us of the proactivity of our teams and what we're focusing on. Dwelling burglary might surprise you. That's fallen significantly over the last 5 years, and nationally has continued to as well. And you often hear it in the Home Office's set of priorities in terms of those crimes that really do impact people significantly when they become victim of them. Robbery is held static. We are bucked to national trends. We are on average between 5 and 6 a month. And then weapons offences again and hate crime both underpin different trends. Weapons again is very much my biggest concern. I'll talk in general terms about those things that keep me awake at night and those things that don't. Weapons is one of those things that keeps me awake at night. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And then again, hate crime, and again, I would include within domestic violence. We've had huge national campaigns rightly focused on increasing reporting of hate crime, increasing reporting of domestic violence. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to see those numbers go up. These are the sorts of crime trends that we're looking at very closely and making sure that in some cases we're in step with the national drive to tackle certain crime types and what's right for us as a local area. So balanced against that then...
Sorry, can I just step in? I've literally got 2 minutes, if that's...
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make it... those of you who don't know, we are holding a quarterly online community engagement meeting where people can come and give us their views. And we also have an open survey that we use. And you can see it's just started from February. We're getting a good number of people fill this survey, and this data is being shared with you as a district council as well. We could just go into the next slides. So, and there really then lies the challenge for me and my team is to balance some of those very difficult problems that we have heard about with some of those very localized problems. They are genuine things that have come out in the word cloud search from our survey. People aren't talking about knife crime and drugs and child exploitation. They're speaking about these things which quite rightly they see on their doorstep and are concerned about. So that's the balance that we've got. and why it cost me so much in coffee to discuss a lot of these things. If you want to just Lovely. So if we go right to the last slide, then if I just wrap up. So when I started, I talked about how you can help. There's 3 things that you can do to help, and today's an open offer. You are a temperature gauge for where you live. You know what normal looks like. You know where, for example, if there is 1 burglary in your village, in your town a month, you know where that is going to cause significant community impact versus a bigger town where 10 burglaries and nobody's going to notice, nobody's going to worry too much. The second thing is to pick up the phone. HTC hold all the numbers and contact details for me and my other colleagues if you need to get in contact with you. We are happy for you to have mobile phone numbers to call us directly to talk about ongoing issues. And the last thing really is it's a bit kind of with our zeitgeist, isn't it? Subscribe, follow what we do, and talk about that with your parishioners. Encourage them to subscribe. We do tons of stuff to try and show what we do, but very often what we hear is we don't know what our police teams are doing. I know that a number of you have come out on an op-in site with us. My team love that. They love taking you out with, and I think quite a lot of you like it as well. Come out and spend a night or a day shift with us as you wish, and come and understand the real challenges that we have and get to understand that. And then when you're speaking with your residents, I think you can add a real genuine way of communicating between us as a group of people with that understanding. I'm going to be short. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Can I be first to come out with you, please? Do we have any questions? Start with Councillor Lowe, please.
Thank you. With the decrease in dwelling burglaries, do you think that could be because people aren't reporting it because they're fed up with nobody coming out and only being given a crime reference number?
No, so we attend every single dwelling burglary. We have done for quite some time, so that shouldn't ever be the case. If that does happen, I'd be really keen to know about that. There is an obvious part of that trend. If that was a 5-year trend, it is a genuine decrease with or without COVID. Dwelling burglary is obviously a different type of crime now because more people are spending time at home, working from home. We have been committed for several years that every single victim of dwelling burglary, home burglary, will be visited and see someone. That shouldn't be happening.
Thank you.
Councillor Davenport.
Thank you, Chief Inspector, for coming to speak to us this evening. Since the last time we spoke, I've had the pleasure of the St. Neots neighborhood policing team going on a walkabout with me in my ward several times. I'm very impressed by their work, especially around drugs offences and arrests made. In fact, during one of our walkabouts, we had to cut it short while they made an arrest on the spot. I understand that the St. Neots team has 1 PCSO and a few PCs. My question would be, given what we know is your restrained resources, how do you decide which areas have which number of staff? Is it based on crime rates? Is it based on population? How do you make that hard decision when you have such a limited staff budget?
A number of vacancies which we're recruiting into. We have a new intake in January, and we will be backfilling those posts, which is really good news.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, good evening. Nice to see you again. Can I just speak up and support Inspector Rogerson? As one of the more long-standing councillors, I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past, and I've heard all the anecdotes rolled out before. People don't report household crimes because the police don't investigate. The police aren't interested. They don't work with us. I found with Paul, when I spoke to him before, we had terrible problems in my ward 5-10 years ago now. And all of these things that you hear time and time again were rolled out. Paul did exactly what he said he would do. He met with me, he met with the local residents, he answered the difficult questions. In fact, he asked the difficult questions as well. So I think what we need to do is, when we've got the opportunity to work with someone like Paul and his team, we need to grab it with both hands, because he actually means what he says. He's not come along here tonight just because actions are ticking his box. He actually will sit and work with the residents. So take him up on that. He likes to be challenged and pushed. And the thing I was always impressed with, as I say, it wasn't just me going to him saying, here's a problem. We eventually got such a dialogue going. He would say to me, Doug, I think there's something similar that you could handle better as the ward member. And it became a good two-way set of work. So I'm really pleased to see that Paul's taken it beyond the inspector level that he had before when he was in the area to an overall, the chief inspector role. And I would encourage you to support that. And I think it's hugely important. I think also, and I'm not being critical of the chair here because he doesn't set the timetable, but when we've got someone like Paul, I don't think it's a good idea to actually have a strict timetable where we bring the hammer down when we've got the opportunity, to work with someone who's very, very busy and he gives his time up to come tonight. We should grab it with both hands. And if there's an opportunity to have twice as long, 3 times as long, and we learn.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for coming along this evening. Greatly appreciated. I've really got two points to make. You're probably aware of a lot of the problems we've had in Market Square in Huntingdon. Antisocial behaviour, drunkenness, people defecating, even instances of homophobic abuse. Your colleague Inspector Norden's been very helpful, but one thing I did suggest was public space protection order. I think that's what it's called these days, where basically you have a ban on alcohol in a certain area, and one of your colleagues said that's fine, but he wasn't sure that you had the resources to actually implement that. I don't know, it's something we can explore further. My second question is really is, again, one of your colleagues told me a few years ago that I get calls from the public reporting incidents to me, and I always say to them, you need to report it to the police. You need to get an incident number. And one of your colleagues said to me, well, don't just get one person to report something, get the whole street to do it. Make sure they're saying the same things. They all get incident numbers that will stick out in your statistics, and then you'll be able to divert resources. I think there's this myth, isn't there, that because the police don't come out straight away, just because you report something that's not an emergency, it doesn't mean that they're not interested. They are interested. They've obviously you've got competing priorities. So I think that might be something useful for us to emphasise to our residents, and for you to perhaps do so as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. It was really interesting through you, Chair, if it's better. It is normal colour. Thanks, Liz. Cheers. Thanks. On the 25th of November, there was a really interesting Facebook post from the Huntingdonshire Police Facebook page about some ticketing in St Neots Market Square of illegal parking, which I think is an excellent move anyway. And as a former St Neots councillor, I'm aware of some of the problems, particularly in the middle of St Neots. But of course, parking problems, traffic problems, as you've shown from your slide from the word cloud, isn't just an urban issue. It's very much a rural issue. In the ward Councillor Butel and I represent, we've got speeding on the B660 through Home, through Glatton, through Gidding. We've got there we go. Parking problems in the middle of Stilton, and I know that's not unique to those villages, if that's not a bad use of English, but it affects other rural villages in Huntingdonshire, which other members represent. I'm really seeking reassurance. Seeking reassurance that this won't keep doing this. I'm seeking reassurance that your officers will be able to come out and look at some of the parking and traffic problems and speeding problems in the rural villages. Because as you rightly said, something like that is picked up on social media, and I've seen it happen before in my ward when the police have come out and issued tickets, when a warranted officer is there with a speed gun. The knock-on effect of that for days afterwards really can have an impact other than what just happens at the time.
Who's next? Councillor Gleadow, please.
Would you like?
Change batteries. Just one.
Good evening. I'm close, so you can hear what I'm going to say. One is a comment, and one's actually a question. I actually, as a new councillor, took up the option of actually going to the local, my local police station. It was excellent. I would highly recommend all new councillors to do that. It was very good, very engaging, and hopefully we'll get a good rapport moving forward. The other question was part of your presentation. You mentioned about weapons. Can you just very briefly say, what you're referring to as weapons?
For working reverse order, so I can remember. So in terms of weapons, unfortunately, what we're finding is knives. Quite a disturbing amount of knives on younger people. Again, as to describe it as something that keeps me awake at night. Chair, did you want me to very briefly respond to each of the questions, or I'll try and remember them each in sequence. So in terms of working together, the PSPO is an issue that we are actively discussing with the district council. That's actually a joint decision, and it's a joint decision we will take together. There is a small task and finish group with officers from the district council to explore that, along with other action that's as you say, the prosecution for the hate crime, etc. That's moving forward as well. In terms of understanding communities and responding, the door-to-door work, the survey that I put up on the graph includes door-to-door work that we would welcome you to come with us to do as well, to speak on the doorstep. We know that certain communities are ready to engage and will talk to us quite freely. There's also, unfortunately, quite a large majority of streets and postcodes where we're not hearing anything from, and we're taking that discussion door to door to support that. And I'm afraid I can't remember the other questions. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chief Inspector. As a new councillor, I found that briefing extraordinarily helpful, and very thankful that you've taken the time to come to this today. To go follow on from Councillor Sanderson about Huntingdon High Street and the issues on there, I understand entirely that you're dealing with extremely limited resources, and I really understand that. But many members of my community, especially women and girls, feel unsafe currently on Huntingdon High Street, to the point where people will come up to me unprompted and say, look, this is really sorting. I don't feel safe out and about. The problem has started to kind of go away slightly over winter in the colder weather, but are there any immediate actions we can take to make sure people feel safer?
I can brief you on what we're currently doing. So a number of that particular group are in receipt of what we call community protection warnings, several of which are breached, who are being prosecuted for that. Obviously, we're working very closely with the Streets and Open Spaces team within Huntingdonshire, and we have a role as part of managing some of that antisocial behaviour as well. Together with obviously the CCTV, the Business Against Crime, the Town Rangers, etc. In terms of advice, again, it is that thing about reporting. Very, very low numbers currently. We get excellent information through elected members. We get excellent information through partners. And as your colleague said earlier on, don't just get one person, get the whole street. And what we can and we do is when we're hearing from, for example, the Business Against Crime managers, their view counts as a huge representation of a lot of people. So again, if you've got third-party information you can give us, we will obviously count that significantly towards the civil action that we're taking with the District Council.
Councillor Tevlin.
Hi, thank you. Paul, I've previously worked with you on the Council Against County Lines. So my question is, from residents I've been hearing, they keep on saying, well, why don't we see the Bobby on the beat anymore in the local villages? And whilst there is no sort of visible police presence visibly as much, it means that things like drugs and nuisance parking seems to still be an issue. So what would your response be from Cambridgeshire Constabulary in terms of how you are managing the expectations of residents and how you're managing priorities to actually show that you are making a difference in other ways?
Sure. So my response would be is that I as an individual, when I try and put my member of the public hat on at the weekend, I feel the same way. I still want to see a police officer when I take my family into a busy area, because it makes me feel safe and it makes them feel safe. A lot of the difficult crime issues that we've discussed already tonight, so exploitation, county lines indeed, domestic violence, modern day slavery, is crime that happens behind a closed door. That is where a significant amount of our time and resource is committed behind those closed doors with victims, trying to prevent that harm from happening. But as Councillor Albion said a second ago, the way that we counteract that is to put very specific targeted activity around those things that we know make a difference and we know that people are concerned about. So whilst you would have seen a huge amount of media presence around our County Lines operation at Hypernova, you'll also see local targeted media information about things like parking and speeding and nuisance patrols, those sorts of things, just to try and make it clear that there's a really difficult balance. There's no getting around that. But we're trying to use make better use of social media and the press to make sure that residents really get that we have listened and that it might just be something for an hour, but it does make a big difference.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Conboy.
Chief Inspector, can I thank you very much for coming this evening? I've had the pleasure of working alongside your colleagues for the last 8 years, and we've been incredibly well supported by the various community officers we've had in that time. But I also remember coming on some training that you ran for district councillors, and I remember you rolling up your sleeves and turning up in community when we had an unexpected group of travellers.
As did you.
Yes, and they came on site, and I was really grateful for the help and support because it allowed us to make those temporary visitors have a safe and smooth time while they were in our community. And actually, it worked incredibly well. So really, the question was, might at some point, I know resources are tight, but might at some point, given a lot of us in this chamber are relatively new, and some of us could do with the practice again, might you offer some training? Because I personally really appreciated it. It worked really well on the ground, and it meant that in our community we were able to help others who were dealing with some of the practical challenges to do so really well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you very much for attending this evening. It was really, really useful. So thank you very much. Item number 8 on our agenda, the budget principles. We will now receive a presentation on the principles for the 2023-24 budget. Will be an opportunity for questions from members, and over to the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources, Councillor Brett Mickle.
Just be gentle with it. Real life is infinitely stranger, Sherlock Holmes once remarked to Watson, than anything that the mind of man could invent. In the context of the last year, it seems obvious that real life is stranger than any work of fiction. We find ourselves caught in a climate, macroeconomic, and geopolitical storm that is not of this council's making, facing the second once-in-a-lifetime event in 3 years. But there is no COVID grant to bail us out this time. This means that difficult decisions around our structural problems cannot be kicked down the road. To paraphrase the MTFS statement in last year's budget, the plan for the next 5 years requires us to spend 8.1 million of our savings to break even. It is very difficult to predict into the future, and I fully recognise the realism of that admission in the text from last year's MTFS. So this needs to be addressed, and we can't set a budget relying that something will turn up. Council will need to note that we do not have the final details from central government of the settlement, and this is now not expected until the end of December. Attempting to publish a budget with this level of uncertainty will force unhealthy assumptions and is likely to be confusing. But we have committed to work collaboratively across the Chamber to benefit all of our residents. And as part of that commitment, this evening we are presenting our budget principles for next year, including a review of our residents' opinion survey. So let's step through the principles. We need to concentrate on the things we can and must influence in order to support our residents when things are tough. The evidence is clear to most that early intervention delivers better outcomes and is cheaper than cutting these services and then being forced to intervene when things have reached crisis point. We consider that budget principle number 1 is to seek to protect the frontline services our residents rely on in these difficult times. We will work to take the hard choices and make the difficult decisions that put the finances in the best shape possible into the future for our residents, our officers, our staff, and whoever forms the next administration. Budget principle number 2 is that we will enact the changes required to avoid using 8.1 billion of reserves to balance the MTFS over the next 5 years, while, if required, remaining prepared to use savings to protect services in the short term. Fees, charges and revenues from commercial activities are all important parts of the HDC income stream while providing important services for different communities. Budget principle number 3 is that we will balance the need for fees, charges and commercial revenues with the demands on our services and our community's ability to pay for them. Budget principle number 4 is that we will maximise innovation opportunities to pursue further efficiencies in running the council, but we will balance this with any need to increase council tax to ensure we have adequately resourced services while we seek to appropriately reward staff. Events mean that commercial property investment contributes unnecessary risk during a period of inflationary and interest rate pressure. Budget principle number 5 is that now is not the time to expand the commercial property portfolio, but we will keep investment opportunities under review. Finally, as we continue to listen to the feedback from the community and consider this with a green lens, budget principle number 6 is that we will consider carefully the things that our communities tell us are important in setting out our budget and future spending proposals. What we'll do now is take a little look through the responses to the survey and what our residents said they think of HDC services. So, in summary, the survey ran from Monday the 8th of November to Wednesday the 30th of November. It received 855 responses, having been promoted on the council's website and via social media accounts. It was also shared with HDC councillors and with town and parish councils, as well as other networks associated with HDC. The survey was made up of 15 questions and asked people how satisfied or dissatisfied they were with the way council runs things and the relative importance of each service. I don't have time to run through all of the questions and responses, so I'm going to step through the key findings, but I will apologise to anyone in advance who is red-green colourblind. Overall, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the way HDC runs things? There is a generally good level of satisfaction with HD services, with only 17% of respondents voicing any level of dissatisfaction. In my experience, surveys of this type can attract a negative response bias, so this is a good result. Next question asked, did you know that only 7 pence in every pound is kept by HDC? And the answer is generally no. The next question asked respondents to rank in order of importance the services that HDC provide. And that order was number 1, recycling and waste, number 2, parks and open spaces, number 3, antisocial behaviour and nuisance, number 4, housing advice and homelessness, number 5, leisure services, number 6, planning, number 7, car parking, and number 8, business support. Best use of time I have is to show the difference between the service ranked most important and least important. So the next slide shows the response to the recycling and waste collection question, where only 2% of people didn't record this as important, and 83% considered it very important. I'm interested about the 1% who don't use the service. The final slide shows the business support responses, where 16% didn't consider this service important, but 55% still saw it as very important or important. I now ask that Council endorse the principles set out this evening as we shape budget for 23-24 that will come to overview and scrutiny in the new year.
Before we do that, do we have any questions from the floor? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask that if we're going to use any reserves over the MTFS, how are we going to build them back up for the next administration, please?
Well, the aim is that we will ensure that we do not use all of our reserves, but if we address the structural concerns, and if we can ensure a steady income and expenditure stream, what will actually end up happening is that we don't need lots of money tied up in reserves. Reserves aren't productive. If you have money sitting there, then it's not working for you. So what we want to be able to do is to leave an even balance between income and expenditure, and that large reserves amount is not present, and therefore we don't worry about rebuilding reserves amount, because actually we have a good level of or an even kill with the money every single year as a result.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not 100% sure I understood the answer there, but in terms of the principles that you've presented, I think 1 and 2, of course, will all seek to protect frontline services whilst protecting our reserves at the same time. Number 3, reading between the lines, it appears to be a warning to our residents that your administration is and that existing charges are likely to go up. We've already seen, of course, the charges at One Leisure have gone up, and as yet we don't know whether that will have an uncertain effect on demand and may have turn out to have the opposite effect on finances that we'd hope. Number 4, you won't get any argument from me on delivering efficiencies, but maximisation of innovation opportunities sounds like something straight out of a... and we need to bear in mind that the real winners are all too often the consultants rather than the organisations that they're advising. On number 5, I'm pleased that investment opportunities remain on the table. I'd been concerned by some statements from some of your fellow cabinet members about getting rid of investment properties that the council has outside of the district's boundaries. Without giving out spoilers for the next item on the agenda, I mean, it is probably worth pointing out that the commercial investment strategy has already delivered 2.8 million to the council in the first 6 months of the financial year, which is 20% ahead of the plan. The last point about residents' engagement, I think I speak for many of us that we were disappointed that we hadn't seen the findings of this engagement until this evening. And it would have been perhaps good to share these findings with members before tonight, because we're being asked to consider their findings now. And clearly there were references there to what residents think are our priorities, and it would have been good for us to have considered those before this evening.
Okay, I'll take the last question first because that's slightly easier. We can look at the procedural side of that to make things available faster. So yeah, absolutely take that one on board. Coming back to your 2 points, one about fees and charges. I think there's a danger if you look at fees and charges through the lens of the budget. If you think about the marketing mix talks about price, product, promotion, place. If you're just looking at the price piece, as you would be forced to do through the lens of a budget, I think that becomes a little bit difficult. So from a budget point of view, we are driven by that need to legally produce a balanced budget. But I think it's far more important that for the rest of that consideration, overview and scrutiny comes through and holds to account decisions being made and makes sure that we're getting the best value, not just from a price point of view, but also from all of the other aspects for the services that we provide. On the investment portfolio, one of the first things I did when I took this role was to review the investment portfolio. I think it's an interesting debate. So some people will say that they don't think councils should be involved at all whatsoever in running any sort of investment portfolio for commercial property. But having looked at it, I found it contained an interesting mix of properties, and it does contribute usefully to the ongoing costs of the council. I don't think anybody in this room would disagree, though, that interest rates are increasing and that there is an awful lot of uncertainty on the market for next year. And with that in mind, holding back on commercial property reinvestment is a sound and sensible thing to be doing. Other opportunities, other options, and other investment methods remain on the table, as you said, and we're happy to look at those as the opportunities come along.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Following on from the previous question, thank you, colleague. Following on from the previous question there. So, as chair of the corporate governance committee, on the committee, obviously we concern ourselves with risk and the management of risk, and we may have a good balance in our property portfolio. But our previous 1151 officer effectively said that we are perhaps holding too much property. The balance only gives us a limited protection in a recession where there's likely to be an illiquid property market, loss of rental income, and depreciation in property prices. So, can you explain how the budget principle considers this risk and helps to manage the risk? Thank you.
So the reason for holding back from investment into new property is exactly because of that risk scenario. And what we don't want to be doing is finding ourselves in a position that we are buying as the market is falling, because then we risk chasing losses. I think there was a point coming back from the earlier question as well. I think a number of people have said to me, why don't we sell the portfolio in order to plug budget gaps? That is not possible. The way that the government sets council rules around expenditure has two distinct pots, and if we were to sell anything from the commercial property portfolio, we would not be able to then use that to fund revenue budget gaps in the week to week or in the year that we are spending. So that would be even less prudent than holding on, even if the market falls and we have a risk of losing income.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. It's my understanding that we'll be shortly asked to consider the council's climate strategy. Tackling climate change is one of the pillars of the corporate plan, but I can't see any provision for it on this report. Can you tell me how you plan to fund the climate strategy?
Okay, so because funds will be tight, what is happening is that the changes required are actually going to be within the operational budget of the departments or the services rather at this point in time. So what we will look to do is to make the changes in operation, what changes of what's happening, procurement decisions, and drive that forward with that agenda for change. But coming back to that investment opportunities question, if there are green investment opportunities that produce good commercial outcomes, then we would look to invest in those as well.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the portfolio holder for these principles. I just a couple of questions really, and one or two comments along the way. As your predecessor
in this role. So, I mean, strangely enough, point two, that's pretty much exactly what was happening last year. And strangely enough, I didn't want to spend 1.1 million of the council's reserves either. So I think that's a continuation of the policy that we had before. But I'd be curious to know what you think an acceptable level coming forward in the budget might be, because presumably your ambition is to reduce that number from the number that I was able to achieve last year. So I'd like to hear that. On the fifth point, which has already generated some interest around commercial investments, I'm not sure I agree with your statement that you made when you were making the presentation, whereby you felt that in an inflationary environment, that it wasn't a good thing to have commercial investment, commercial investment policy, because that's exactly the reason why it's there, because the income is linked to RPI. And the one challenge you're going to face is that you can only be able to increase council tax by about 3.1%, whereas your commercial investment portfolio is running almost 20% higher this year than you'd budgeted. Now, some of that is because losses that were potentially going to happen haven't happened, but some of that is because rents are rising in line with RPI adjustments that are built into the contracts that are there. So I don't accept, I'm afraid, I mean, I respect the point that Councillor Wells made, but I'm not, as councillors, we don't always have to agree with our 151 officers. So I think, would you agree on that second point there, that you've said we will pause commercial activity? There hasn't been a commercial investment in this council since 2019. So all you're doing is really, again, continuing the policies that were already set out before. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your response possibly to why we've got it. I think you made a good point about the two sides of the budget there. But really, I don't have any objections to these. I think you should proceed and get on with it. Let's see what emerges at the other end of it. But I'm heartened to see these budget principles are broadly similar to the ones that I think we were using last year.
Okay, I'll answer the questions in the order you've asked them. Where would I like that 8.1 million to be? If I were a dreamer, I'd love to have a surplus at the end of the 5-year period. I think realistically that's not going to happen. I would hope that we can get it as close to zero as possible. I'm sure everyone in this chamber would, because if we can do that, then we're doing fantastic things for our residents, and we're thinking with things with the innovation and the imagination. On the commercial investment point, maybe something's getting lost in translation. I'm of the view that we shouldn't increase it. I think it brings a useful income at this point in time. I think there is downside risk in every investment in next year, except, ironically, putting your money in a savings account, assuming that the bank is still in one piece. I think there's another piece to the commercial investment or commercial property investment piece that brings additional complexity, and that is just a change in the rules from the government themselves around the way that the Public Works Loan Board is allowed to lend money to us. So we are not allowed to borrow to spend money with yield being the primary motivation outside of our district anymore. So aspects of that commercial activity that's happened in the past, we just wouldn't be able to do unless we went to commercial lenders. Going to commercial lenders at the moment would not be a great place to be. So you've got to hold all of these things in balance. There's lots of things that we need to think about with this, but hopefully that allays your fears.
And finally, Councillor Hodgson-Jones. You had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me. I really would welcome the opportunity to study the principles in detail, and I would welcome seeing them on the slides on the screen rather than just hearing the bland slide we have. I'm interested to know what your budget approach is going to be in terms of looking at new areas where the council can generate money. So instead of increasing the fees on existing facilities, are there other opportunities that we can look at? And one thing I do recall, and you recognize this, is that 3 E's, people often think about economy and efficiency, but the third one is efficacy. And so we shouldn't just be looking at where we can cut costs or become more efficient. We should look at how well what we spend actually delivers what we want and look at what services we can deliver well. So I just want to understand how you see the third E being in there rather than focusing on the first or the second.
I believe the principles went out as part of the paper pack. I think they might have gone out a day late. So hopefully, maybe you missed them, but hopefully that would have given opportunity just to have read through them in advance. I agree with you on the point of other opportunities. I think as one door closes, hopefully another will open. I mean, we were hearing about different ways of heating, different ways of capturing electricity. We look at the rather large increase in energy costs, and with all of that in mind, I think it offers a whole round of ways that we could consider options that will allow us to invest with a tinge on it that isn't just about cutting things or just about reducing services. Efficacy, if I can get my words out, yes, absolutely. I think there is so much uncertainty and double options coming from the autumn statement from the government that we've necessarily had to put some of those thoughts into the back of our minds rather than at the front. So I think that we are going to have to get round the budget cycle, see if there is any space to move, and then start thinking about exactly those sorts of options as we move forward into next year.
And finally, Councillor Cledo.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for the presentation. I think it actually sets the right tone of where we actually want to be going and actually looking forward into the new year as to in these very uncertain times. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. So to move this forward, do we have a proposer? Councillor Hunt and a seconder, Councillor Wakeford. And all those in favour? And any abstentions? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on to item number 9, if you'd like to stay where you are. Pages 17 to 44 of your agenda. We will now receive the presentation of the 6-monthly update in respect of Treasury management activity, including investment and borrowing activity and Treasury performance.
As the detailed information is within the pack, I will give a summary now. So, best practice and prescribed Treasury management guidance requires members to be kept up to date in respect of Treasury management activity for the first half of the year, including investment and borrowing activity and Treasury performance. The Council's 2022-23 Treasury Management Strategy was approved by the Council on the 23rd of February 2022. The report in the Council pack sets out the Treasury performance for the period between the 1st of April and the 30th of September 2022, and I will cover the highlights. The main purpose of Treasury management is to ensure the Council has sufficient cash to meet its day-to-day obligations, to borrow when necessary to fund capital expenditure, including borrowing in anticipation of need when rates are low, to invest our surplus funds in a manner that balances a low risk of default with a fair rate of interest. The key market Treasury management issues influencing the Council's decision-making through the first half of the budget year were The Bank of England base rate increased from 0.75% in March to 2.25% in September. Rising gilt rates following the mini budget on the 23rd of September triggered a short burst of significant volatility. 5-year gilt rates rose from 1.41% to 4.4%, feeding into the rates paid for lending to the UK Debt Management Office. The Council's responses to the key issues are: when the Council has surplus funds, these are primarily invested on a short-term basis, mainly in the UK Debt Management Office, money market funds, and the Council's transaction bank, the NatWest. Think of the UK Debt Management Office as being a little bit like National Savings and Investments, but for local government. Where it is possible, a higher return will be sought where it doesn't sacrifice liquidity. For example, the use of fixed term deposits for 6 months, but not when the money is needed in 5 months' time. Where economic conditions are forecast to deteriorate, then it is vital to monitor financial institutions' credit ratings and review credit default swap rates. A swap rate is the cost to insure lending. The Council's Treasury Advisor is Arlene Close. The Council's commercial investment strategy commenced in 2015-16 and is also known as the Commercial Property Portfolio. Detailed information relating to the investments are in the pack, but to summarise, these investments generated 2.8 million of revenue income for the Council in the first 6 months of the financial year after taking into account direct costs. The Council has not taken on any new loans over the past 6 months, whilst one loan that had been made by the Council to Places for People was repaid early. We have in turn paid down the Public Works Loan Board loan to us, although this took place in October, so is outside of the detailed numbers. This does have a small impact on future income from interest that we would have earned, but this is not material, and it has been offset to some extent by an early repayment bonus that we shared 50-50 with Places for People. The Council loan book is shown on page 28 of your pack, and every one of those loans is fixed for its lifespan. There is one loan due for repayment next budget year. However, it is a loan made by the Council to another party who will repay or extend via the Council. Turning to overview and scrutiny observations, the comments made were over points of clarity, and I have incorporated the answers given within my report this evening. In addition, Karen Sutton, our Director of Finance and Corporate Resources, and myself are working on ways to improve the accessibility and clarity of the finance reports to those without a finance background. We're going to start presenting some of those reports in the new financial year, as to change presentation of existing data within the current reporting period would not be appropriate.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you. I just have a question with regard to the table of loans on page 28, because on the right-hand side, we have the schedule of the life of the loans, period in year.
Councillor, could you?
Thank you. PWLB 4011 were paid in full on the 5th of October. So are we saying that those loans were prepaid on the 5th of October, or are we saying that the 25 years shown in the right-hand side was the original maturity of those loans, original tenor of those loans, and they have now matured? I'm a little confused as to what that means.
So I don't have the table in front of me. I believe it is the point that the loans were taken with the time of period remaining for the loan from that date. Now, if I'm wrong, I will be corrected by email tomorrow morning.
All right.
What we'll also do is we'll look to remove any confusion in the next report.
Yes, so that it'd be helpful to know what is the remaining tenor of those loans as well as the original tenor of those loans so that we can work out what the maturities are going to be in the coming years. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 10, questions to members of the Cabinet. Moving to those questions, can I remind everybody that questions must be relevant to matters for which the Council has powers or duties, must not relate to an item which is included elsewhere on the Council agenda, since they can be raised at that point in the meeting, should be limited to obtaining information or pressing for action, and must not divulge or require to be divulged confidential or exempt information, and must not exceed 2 minutes in duration. Do we have any questions? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. My question is to Councillor Taylor. Plans to increase fees and charges for One Leisure were recently approved by the Cabinet. Can you please explain the rationale behind this and what measures we will be taking to monitor the effect on usage?
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. One Leisure has a rising cost in utilities, staffing and other general operational expenditures in 22 to 23 and leading into 23 and 24. The rationale for the price increases is to offset the rising costs. Following the submission and approval of One Leisure budget 22 to 23, the utility costs have significantly increased. After a thorough review of energy costs across the One Leisure facilities, we believe that the new tariff price will increase by 530k. That is an increase of 88% of the original 22 to 23 budget. ONS and Cabinet were presented with 3 options for consideration. Option 1 was no price increase. Option 2 was increase One Leisure pricing by an average of 8.7%, thus generating potential revenue of 194,000. Option 3, increase by an average of 12.8%, thus potential revenue of 483,000. Recommendation was launched with option 2 and indeed Cabinet's choice. The increases have gone through extensive competitive benchmarking exercise and the feedback and advice offered by UK Active, alongside the expertise and experience of our senior officers within One Leisure. This enables One Leisure to remain competitive, sustainable, and offer value for money. Please note the concessions have not had a price increase, so it is still affordable for people that are struggling. If a price increase was not implemented, One Leisure will operate at a 274,907 deficit in 23 and 24, and thereafter, as part of the MTFS, a 300k plus deficit for the remaining 4 years through to 27 and 28. It is important to note One Leisure has not had a general price increase for the last 5 years. We think it is very important, and I was grilled at overview and scrutiny. You know, how are we going to monitor that we haven't got footfall decreases? We've spoken about this, Head of Leisure and myself as portfolio holder, and we are going to monitor the footfall alongside the usage and to look at the new membership. So we're going to keep a very, very close eye on this, and we're going to report back to overview and scrutiny. Head of Leisure and senior officers are, as we speak, developing a new business strategy for One Leisure. This should be implemented early next year. I'm encouraged to see this has already started. I spoke with Head of Leisure the other day. So it's really encouraging, and
it's going to be a key part of making One Leisure commercially sustainable.
Thank you. Councillor Slade. You had your hand up? No? Oh, sorry.
Councillor Pickering.
Let's try that.
My question is to Councillor Wakeford. I'd like to say St Neots residents, we're very pleased that we're well into the design stage for the improvement works on the Market Square and surrounding parts of the town centre in St Neots. And I'd be grateful if you would please pass on my thanks to the Market Towns team for their recent visits to meet residents and to discuss the plans. However, my question is actually about another part of the district, and I wondered if you had any news to share about the local growth fund bid that we put in for Ramsey.
Thank you, Councillor. You almost on theme, but I would be delighted to pass on your thanks to the Market Towns team for their visits in the it was cold then and it's colder now earlier in the month as part of their engagement week. As members on the overview and scrutiny panel for performance and growth will certainly be aware, and as members from Ramsey are very much aware, but in case anyone else has missed it, yes, as of a couple of weeks ago, we are delighted that on third time of trying after two rebuffed attempts for reasons nothing to do with our bid, but to do with procedure and meetings at the combined authority, a local growth fund bid for £1.15 million to support public realm improvements and a produce hub in the Great White area of Ramsey has been secured. So complementing other funding we had identified already, including some revenue we're able to put in as well to support its development. We are really excited to be working with members in the town council in Ramsey over the coming months ahead in order to make best use of that funding. So thank you for the opportunity to flag that to anyone who might have missed it.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Sir Taylor. I was at a meeting on Tuesday evening, and town councillors at that meeting asked me to raise with you this evening a question about a couple of parking issues in St Neots, and I'm sure as Councillor Pitt will no doubt testify, has probably given you some advance warning. The questions were, do you have any plans to provide more parking in the town centre with less than a minimum 2 hours stay to enable those who only need a short amount of time to collect a prescription or go to the post office? And secondly, what has happened to the free after 3 promotion? Prior to the pandemic, used to during December to encourage more visitors to our town centres to do their Christmas shopping. I mean, I understand the weather is bad at the moment, but having been in St Neots town centre a couple of afternoons this week already, it doesn't feel that we're just 10 days before Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. With the first question, I would like to give a written response on that one, if that's okay. Second question, the 3 after 3, it's a good question because I actually asked that. Apparently, I've been told that as the scheme was, it's quite confusing actually, from 3 p.m. It was offered in 2019 and was removed from the budget by the previous administration in around 2018, but still offered in 2019 whilst not being in budget for the final time. But it is something that I think, in my capacity, we should be looking at again.
Thank you, Chair. Well, while you're also looking at that again, Councillor Taylor, I have in my possession a copy of an election leaflet from from the portfolio holder that says, and I quote, Simone has and will always oppose charging for car parking in the HDC Riverside car park in St Neots. That's the car park in my ward. Now, as luck would have it, you are now have responsibility for the HDC Riverside car park in St Neots. So at the same that you write to me, the first question, would you also be able to say whether it's still your plans to remove parking charges from that car park?
It is something that I have spoken about, but in the current climate, I don't think it's something that we are able to do.
Thank you. Councillor Slade.
Thank you. My question is along the same lines, actually, about and I'm quite inspired by the Chief Inspector's Mind Cloud, or what it's called.
Councillor, we can't hear you. If you could.
So parking was actually kind of one of the key ones on his list. So I'd like to know what we're doing about the civil parking in this district.
Would you like an update on? I have got.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just clarify that question? It was civil parking enforcement.
So on CPE. Yeah, the civil parking enforcement. Let me because not everyone here. There's some people here that are quite new, so I'd like to just give them a little bit of a background on it. So civil parking enforcement, we call it CPE for short, transfers the powers and responsibilities for on-street parking from on-street enforcement from police to the Highways Authority in accordance with the Traffic Management Act 2004. There are only 6 local authorities which haven't implemented the CPE in England. 4 of those are actually within Cambridgeshire, although civil parking enforcement adoption is now being undertaken across Huntingdonshire, Fenland and South Cambs. Works which include discussion with the county around the details of the agreement are continuing, and we'll see the delivery of civil parking enforcement in Huntingdonshire. But the achievable date of implementation has been reviewed by Cambridgeshire County Council based on their available resources. And the need for CCC to confirm funding of a specific area in the project's delivery, which was formalised at CCC Highways and Transport meeting on the 6th of December this year. So unfortunately, the revised date for commencement of CPE in Huntingdonshire is going to be October 2024. This has all been updated on the website, so it's quite visible, and it's very transparent. I would like to recommend that members read the full report from CCC, or you can watch it on YouTube as well, and it'll give you some more information on it.
Thank you. Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Councillor Sanderson. We're doing well here. Yeah, I've passed it to him already, so hopefully he's had a chance to look at it. And I apologise for sending it later than I promised you that I would. So here we go. Really, it's around the delegation of decisions around the planning system, and just some confusion that I think members and our councils are feeling about this. And really, it's noting that no two planning applications are quite the same. Is the discretion as to whether to bring an application before the Development Management Committee, as contained within the council's constitution, being correctly understood and exercised? There's a feeling amongst a number of councillors who've asked me questions that it may not be, and I'm actually unclear myself, which is why I bring the question to you. The constitution, when it was reviewed in August of this year, made certain responsibilities there and delegated certain decisions to officers. I'm going to paraphrase this slightly. There's a discretion. Keep doing that, Ross. That'd be great. Thank you. It exercised as to what matter could be considered significant, major, or material, and might represent a departure from the local plan. In these instances, there's discretion to be exercised as to what is major or otherwise, and whether it needs to be put before the relevant committee or not. There's some confusion amongst members, I feel, and across the chamber. It might be with a lot of us being new, with people are asking as to exactly how that function works. Alongside that, the second part is analysis of paperwork shows us some inconsistency as to what planning applications get called into DMC, which is another side of the same equation. And the evidence is a confusion amongst councils, both councillors here and parish councils, as to exactly what triggers a call in and when we can do that. So I thought that it might be worthwhile raising that question with you to see whether or not actually it's been interpreted correctly, and if it is, can we do something to get the message out there as to exactly how it works, so both members here and elsewhere understand exactly what that is. And I'll pass it to you, Councillor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Duke for his question. So I think actually the adoption of the new scheme of delegation is actually a little bit older. I think it was approved by DMC on the 14th of October 2019. I think we will be careful about when things go to DMC, because obviously that does take a lot of time, adds more to our agenda, could potentially delay this. We did have quite a lengthy meeting last time, which I'm sure was greeted with great delight by all members. But I think that was an example of where things should be called into DMC. Obviously, as well, we need to consider the fact that we don't take amendments to applications anymore, and that may result in a decrease in applications coming forward. But I think it's key that we monitor this and we provide evidence. I'm happy to send an update to and to work with Councillor Dew and others about how we can make sure the process works smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you. I have got 4 names for questions, which we need to be conscious of time. So if we can keep the questions as brief as possible. Councillor Tevlin, I have you first.
Thank you. I've got a question for Councillor Sanderson. What is the timetable for the review of the local plan, and how are the council members and Huntingdonshire community going to be engaged during this process?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I have that. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for the question. So the importance of community engagement in preparation of a local plan is recognised at a national level, and the legally required process for engagement is set out in the Statement of Community Involvement, which will be presented to overview and scrutiny, performance and growth, and then on to Cabinet in January. This will detail all the statutory requirements of who and how we will engage with local communities and all of our stakeholders. Engagement will involve town and parish councils, a wide range of local groups and organisations, planning agents and developers, as well as local residents. There'll also be a section in there on the role of councillors and committees in the plan. Discussions are actually ongoing between our planning, policy and communication teams to prepare a detailed programme of engagement activities for the initial phase of engagement on the update to the local plan. That'll include online engagement systems, traditional and social media, and face-to-face engagements.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. Sanderson, sorry, I was just checking my microphone. With the way
Councillor Lowe, sorry, could I just interrupt? That is actually a county council question rather than a district. Yeah, so if we could just keep it to the SIL rather than engaging in the conversation with highways. So we just keep it to the point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lowe, I think that's a very good question. There was an awful incident at this location a few years ago. I think 4 people were killed and 12 people were severely injured. So in the 2020-21 financial year, and if you look at our infrastructure funding statement, you'll see that we've allocated £500,000 of SIL towards this. And I think that's something that we still need to ensure that's available. And that's obviously worth a lot less today than it was back then. In terms of the progress of the scheme, I have actually been in touch with the Director of Highways at County and reminded her of this and asked for this safety project much needed to be to come about as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I've got to make sure that I keep moving down this way. First of all, can I thank the Executive Leader, Councillor Conboy, for the work she put in on behalf of my ward in last week's planning appeal, where we both had the pleasure, I say it loosely, in giving evidence to the Planning Inspectorate. I think it gave us a real stark reminder of how important it is that the Development Management Committee, DMC, is to ensure that committee we have a full understanding and knowledge of the policies when engaged in debate and looking to either refuse or accept the officer's recommendations in front of us. I and my colleagues on this side of the chamber, who are members of the Development Committee, have nothing but praise for the planning officers in the way that they professionally compile and present their reports. And to this end, I'd like to put on record our confidence that we have in our planning officers and planning reasons for their recommendations. But my question, Chair, is actually to the portfolio holder for planning. Following the last couple of DMC meetings, does he have full confidence in his planning team due to the fact that over those last 2 meetings, I can see you, Sam, and without any material planning reasons, he decided to vote against his officers and their recommendations on not 1, 2, but 14 occasions without any material planning reasons I put in, which is frankly quite unheard of.
Well, thank you for the question, Councillor Niche. I did give planning reasons, and they were that I felt it was against its neighbourhood plan. There was clearly a different interpretation by our planning officer, who was thoroughly professional, and I fully understand his reasons for doing so. I think the 14 applications you mentioned were all related to demolition of garages and erection of developments in Amesbury, but I do have full confidence in our team. It isn't unheard of for the portfolio holder to vote at DMC against an officer recommendation, as I think you actually showed yourself when you had to go to a planning appeal, which is probably not the best use of time. I do agree, though. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is correct. On one occasion I have, but 14 in one with very limited, on most of those there were no planning reasons given from the portfolio holder.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that Councillor Niche found my performance less than satisfactory at DMC. I'll certainly do my best to improve. I sit a couple of seats away from him, so I'll be listening very carefully to his advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Councillor Sanderson again, sorry. Could I please ask if there's any improvement to the speed in determining the consent of conditions after planning approval? They appear to be taking as long as the determination of the original plans. Ramsey Town Council are most concerned at the time being taken with regards to the town's new commercial site, the Northern Gateway. Officers are holding up the commencement of the site because of a 2-hour window of delivery in the early morning. Lidl, the anchor business for this development, are asking for a 5 a.m. start and officers 7 a.m. There is only one isolated residence opposite the proposed development, which has an industrial unit either side of it. The Town Council urged the officers to find a solution that works for the town. Ramsey residents want this and the key needed to unlock the economic growth in the area it needs. Ramsey Town Council are worried that this project will not go ahead as we can't guarantee Lidl's will not walk away.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Brereton for letting me know he would ask this question. So I think in the application you're referring to, it's condition 22 regarding deliveries, and there are some concerns from our team about 5 a.m. deliveries and disturbance that may cause local residents. They have been in discussion with the applicants, and they have suggested a way forward, but that doesn't seem to have been accepted so far. So I'd certainly welcome the opportunity of discussing further with you and see if we can find an acceptable way forward, because I know this is a much needed project for the people of Ramsey. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question to Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I was interested to hear Councillor Sanderson's answers on the two recent DMC panels. So I'd like to turn my attention to the executive leader to say, is she confident and does she have confidence in her executive council for planning?
Yes.
Not a wholly unsurprising answer from you there, but I'm just curious because I don't think that the answer that was given by the portfolio holder about the St Neots neighbourhood plan as being the reason for which he objected on 14 different occasions over 2 different nights of scrutiny. So it wasn't like he was having an off night. He came back the following week and did the thing over again. The reality is that and the planning officers were very clear about the fact that the national policies and the local plan takes precedence. So I find it really, I find it a little baffling, the reason that was given. And I think 14 different occasions isn't very good. And I would like you to reflect on that and perhaps offer some of your own thoughts, given your experience on DMC.
I would be happy to respond to that. It was part of one of my last duties, other than determining the planning that then went to appeal. I recall it was a very difficult set of decisions that needed to be made. They were not straightforward. Usually, as you know, we determine each site on its own merit. But when they were originally presented, they were presented as a single presentation, which leads to cumulative impact. It will have been difficult for any member of DMC to decide those planning applications. But we are always reflecting on those experiences. I would reflect, having stepped off that committee, that we have a large number of new members to that committee. We already have training planned with officers. I think that's entirely right and appropriate. And having just served on my first appeal with Councillor Niche, I am reminded that even those of us who have served on DMC for a long period of time, in my case 8 years, it can be quite challenging to remember all of the policies exactly when you want them at the tip of your fingers to be able to refer to them. So taking that experience just in the last week and reflecting on the experiences of the last couple of DMCs, there will be training for all councillors, which I hope will be beneficial to everybody.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, appointment of interim managing director and head of paid service, returning officer and electoral registration officer. Report of the Senior Officers Committee. Councillor Sarah Comboy, Chair of the Senior Officers Committee, will now introduce the report of the meeting held on the 24th of November 2022 and move the recommendations contained therein. Now, this report was marked to follow on your agenda and has now been tabled for those of you who still receive paper copies.
Thank you very much, Chair. So you have a paper in front of you. You will know that we have the resignation of our current Managing Director. I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. So therefore, we have then held the panel as set out in your paper. The panel, for those of you who are not aware, is cross-party, cross-chamber. There was a unanimous decision to make the recommendation that came to Cabinet, and Cabinet is therefore recommending to you that Mr. Oliver Morley, Corporate Director of People, be appointed as the Council's Interim Managing Director and Head of Paid Service, Electoral Registration Officer and Returning Officer on an interim basis until the 1st of March 2023 for a fixed term ending on the 31st of August 2023.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Davenport-Ray. And can I have a show of hands for those supporting? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
which case, on behalf of all of us, congratulations to Mr. Morley. Congratulations.
Item 12, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority updates. This standing item provides an opportunity for District Council members to ask questions and comment on Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority issues. This report was also marked as to follow on your agenda. Can I invite Councillor Sanderson to present details of the activities of the Combined Authority, and questions will be invited after the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. I substituted for Councillor Conway at the board meeting on the 30th of November. I think there are probably three issues that will be of interest to our members here this evening. I think Councillor Wakeford mentioned it earlier. That's the decision to approve funding of 1.15 million for Great White improvements in Ramsey, links to the local growth fund, the food hub, and other improvements which I think are going to be very good for the people of Ramsey. The second point is that Councillor Anna Bailey, who's the leader of East Cambridgeshire District Council, and her counterpart at Peterborough, called in the decision of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee relating to the Ting bus, which is commonly known as, which assists people in the west of our district. I'm pleased to say that the call-in was not successful, and there wasn't a major interruption in that service. I think they could have been had this have been successful, but we were content with the governance arrangements for that, which I think is very good news. And the third point relates to the improvement plan. I felt it was a much improved meeting. I thought member behaviour was generally pretty good. It was a very lengthy meeting, of course, as these are, but I felt that we considered all the issues thoroughly and did so with a sense of respect for each other's opinions. I'll happily take any questions.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the call-in of the vote on the Ting extension. Although the decision still stands, I found the call-in of the Transport Committee's decision quite troubling. All of the districts have representatives on that committee to express the interests of their district. And having been in the room to watch that committee, the East Cambridgeshire member enthusiastically voted in support and suggested that maybe East Cambridgeshire could be the next site of an extension. So as the Ting service currently only operates in Huntingdonshire, the delay caused by this call-in created contractual risks to the service that has provided such a lifeline to our most rural residents. And these risks were borne by Huntingdonshire residents alone, not East Cambridgeshire, where the call-in had been made. Given your comments about the improvement scheme, do you feel that the improvement scheme is progressing, or will our residents continue to suffer from unprofessional and unproductive behaviour from some of the board members of the Combined Authority?
Thank you for your question. I agree. I'm pleased that we didn't suffer a big disruption in service. The contractual arrangements were found to be completely in order. We did have clear advice on that. I was very disappointed, as you said, that by the call of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee endorsed this, and for some reason it was called in by representatives from other parts of the district. I think going forward, we are improving a little bit. I hope we'll see fewer incidents like this, and we'll be able to solve the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to the best of our ability.
Councillor Gray.
The last time we all met, I asked the executive councillor about where we were up to with the ongoing saga of the investigation into the mayor, expressing my concern really that it was not good for the mayor personally, and I very much regret that since that meeting took place, my words have come to pass. So I do wish the mayor of CPCA the very best as he recuperates at this point in time. But where are we up to with getting to the end of this? Because the reality is it's a cloud is being cast over the Combined Authority. in central government, because we have a mayor who is currently being investigated. So I'm not asking for you to comment on the investigation, because you can't. What I'm wondering is, how long does it take to get to the bottom of whatever is going on? Because, you're quite right to call out sort of, poor behaviours and what have you. But the reality is the combined authority, whatever you've said this evening, isn't functioning in the way that it ought to. And it isn't delivering for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in the way that they would expect. And some of that is connected to the fact that people are looking at it and saying it has a governance problem. And so, when are we going to get to the bottom of it for everybody's sake? And I'm guessing the executive leader may wish to tell us how she's getting on.
Councillor Conboy.
If I may, Chair, thank you. I share your concerns. I wish that we already had a report. We don't. Mayor Nick Johnson's absence is not directly related to what's been going on, but obviously at the moment he is recuperating from surgery. So we will not have him back for some time. I am also urging that we have a quick process, but the advice from officers is that they need to continue to do the process appropriately, and I haven't got a definitive timescale. But I am, like you, urging that it is quick, but fair and proper. And that's the difficulty. So once I have a definitive timescale, I will be happy to share it. But at this stage, we don't have that. Just simply that officers are aware that as members of the authority, we wish that it would be concluded swiftly, but with due process.
Thank you. Any further questions on that? No.
I'll hand you over to Councillor Dew and Councillor Hassel.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm going to try something slightly different tonight. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, so
Start on it and we'll follow through.
So do I use this one? Oh yes, I do. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. So, yeah, just to start off, I'm sure you'll join me in wishing Mayor Nick Johnson all the best, and hope that none of his ails are related to the trials and pressures of local government. So Doug and myself have just really selected a couple of areas which we think are the ones that you're probably going to be most interested. So they relate firstly to the improvement plan, which looks like it's moving along quite nice at the moment. It's early days, I suppose, but just some highlights. The June vacancy rate, which back in June was about 30%, has now been brought under control with significant new hires. I believe the attrition rate was about 1 to 3% in November when we had the meeting. So some good news on that side of things. The improvement board is now in place with Lord Kerslake. That's the man. Who's chair. And there are overall 3 member peers in there, and the improvement framework was unanimously approved by the board, which shows some signs of the board acting together, which is good. And the improvement plan consists of 6 strands. If anyone wants to know exactly what they are, please see me afterwards. But each has a project group, and each has a sponsor. Chief exec from one of the constituent councils. So yeah, the structure is pretty good. I draw your attention just to one of the themes, which was amber, that the rest were green, which was design and implement an organisation for today's performance, which is amber. And this relates to the performance management aspect and it not being associated properly with the risk management framework. So there's more need for focus there. But just overall, the interim CEO believes that the risks identified due to the perceived weaknesses in governance that were identified by the external auditors are being successfully mitigated. So considering where we were back in June, I think there has been some significant improvement. So if we can just move on to the next slide, which was the other area that is of a big focus for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was budget. And just inform councillors that the majority of the budget headroom has been allocated out, so there's no capacity for new projects. The retendering of the buses, which I think we are all very familiar with and very important to us here in Huntingdonshire as a grounds. A lot of the routes that were proposed to be cut when Stagecoach rearranged their contract were in Huntingdonshire. So that has now been addressed with the 5 months of the year now largely back in place, but please, if they didn't put in place all routes, please please do let me know. But with this has resulted in a 1.7 million 50% overspend on a 3.4 million annual budget. And just moving on to next year, to deliver the existing network for the whole of 2023-24, it will cost an estimated 7 million, which is double the planned budget of 3.5 million. So this is an area of concern and subject to significant uncertainty, both from a funding side, but also, and this is another warning for us all, the prospect of further withdrawal of routes by existing operators. So it's not just Stagecoach. So if we can have the final slide, please. So that leaves us with the aspect of funding, and I'll just hand over to Doug to discuss that.
Thank you, Rach. I love this microphone. It's great, isn't it? Yeah. No, I mean, as we've already touched on, the budget is unbalanced and unfunded at the present time. There's certain elements that are simply unknown. There is an aspiration from the Mayor's office that the franchising in the bus services is the way forward, but the reality is, from the information we had last time, that that's not going to be a short-term fix. That's something that's going to take 2 or 3 years to get here if it arrives at all. So we've got to come up with some answers in between. I personally have a huge amount of faith in the current interim chief executive. We've had a few over the years, and you know, it hasn't filled me with much confidence that this 30% turnover of staff has mostly been the chief executives and their assistants. So I think it's hugely important that we get someone on board who actually looks you in the face and tells you the message that you want to hear, whether you like it or not. It tells you exactly how it is, and I'd sooner that than not, which is why we're getting these figures. So there was a presentation on saving the bus routes this year, and there was a presentation afterwards and said, if we're going to do the same again, this is where the gap is, and we've got to find the answers to it. So he's not saying there aren't any answers. He's actually presented the problem and said, we've now got to go and find them. So us as a scrutiny panel, our job is to sort of follow that up and see where it goes. So it's hugely important to do. One of the things that is being looked at is apparently somewhere within the combined authority constitution, there's an opportunity for the mayor to actually put a small precept in. I think it's only up to about 2%, but we're not sure what the mechanisms are on that at the moment, or if you can use it at all. But it's something we've not had before, because the idea never was that the mayor should have to use it. But with the times we now live in, it's obviously something that's there. Once again, the chief executive has been honest and said, I will look at it. And it doesn't mean he's going to use it, but it's flagged up that it could be an opportunity. And in the times we live in, another 1 or 2% on the precept, which is probably be the precept as a whole that we collect. We were talking earlier on when the executive member did the presentation that we keep, you know, 7% or whatever it is, and that the other 93% goes elsewhere. This 2% will be on that 100%, so it's not a small figure by any means. So it's something to be looked at. But they are interesting times. Lord Kerslake and his team are reporting back, and I'm sure Councillor Hassel or Conboy will correct me if I'm wrong, but the intention is it should be early in the new year. You know, they're not sitting on this for a 3-year report. It's got to be turned around so that, you know, the budgets can be delivered this year and there's confidence going forward. And I think there's a measure of how serious it's being taken, because Lord Kerslake is, you know, hugely influential and has done a lot of good work elsewhere. So it's not like putting me in there and saying, well, Doug's a good lad, he'll sort it out. It really is a heavyweight there doing the job properly. So I think we can be confident it's going forward. I think we all as members accept the fact that when it was originally set up, it was set up in a hurry, and there's a few things in there you just wouldn't do again. And there has been this problem all along. It's been quite confrontational. I mean, there's a lot of criticism of why are members voting this way and that way, especially amongst the Conservative group members at the moment. But all you have to do is flick it back 2 years, and it's exactly the opposite way around for the previous 5 years. So, and it's because the system set it up to be that way. You know, the intention was you would have an opposition
that would lead solely on you know on a critical basis. And actually, it's produced exactly that. So instead of critical threats, they become critical problems. So I'm confident the current chief exec and the work he's doing, along with Lord Kerslake's team, is going to actually come up with some good results here. And I hope to report better in the future. So and we'll bring things like this a bit more in the future, just sort of make it a bit more interesting, didn't we? So any questions at all? Just ask Councillor Hassel.
Do we have any questions? Councillor West.
Chairman, this is no. So relieved that Councillor Dooth haven't actually involved themselves in it because they're wasting money they could be paying to certain quarters. So, Chairman, I'm encouraged that Councillor Dooth thinks there's something to look forward to. There's going to be some improvement, but by God, they need it.
Can I just do a quick response on that? Yeah, I think that's true. You know, that there has been things in the past and issues where Whitehall have pulled money back. I think one of the problems that's been identified by the interim chief exec and Lord Kerslake is the fact there's a lot of money come forward, for example, the retrofitting, where the money went back to government, and we all sit there and think, you know, 20 million or whatever it was went back to government and didn't get used. The truth was, I think, not that it wasn't needed. I think because of the way the combined authorities worked in the past, what you need to have is, because there's such small timescales of how long this money's available for, you've got to have these projects ready to go on the shelf, because by the time we reacted to it, the time had gone. So I think this is one of the things the interim chief exec is working on in future. If we get told here's 20 million for retrofitting, and go, oh, here's 300 houses we can do it, or whatever number it provides. So I hope that gives you a bit more confidence on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Orban.
Oh, it's working. Thank you, Chair. While it's working, quickly, on a similar vein, when the combined authority provides money to housing associations to fund housing projects, what monitoring is undertaken? And I'll take a written answer on this if it's detailed, on those projects to make sure the money is spent and the housing is delivered.
You probably will have to take a written one from us on that one, because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But I'll ring in the morning on the way to work like I normally do, and I'll tell you.
Not too early. No further questions? No. Thank you both. Councillor Britell will now provide an update of the activities of the Audit and Governance Committee on behalf of Councillor Corney. And again, we will be inviting some brief questions after the presentation. Can I also just ask you to bear in mind that responses will need to be sent to you by email from Councillor Corney? Yes, please.
So the report is, at the most recent meeting, most of our time was spent housekeeping with the regular updates on the capital investment and treasury management strategies. A large amount of time was spent debating the improvement of framework and the risk register improvement, which is a direct response to the recent Ernst & Young letter and the CPCA's reply in it. In it, the CPCA have set out its plan on how it will improve, highlighting what is and what has already been put in place. We were joined virtually by the interim chief executive, who took us through the reply and highlighted the fact that they have set up an independent improvement board that is chaired by Lord Bob Kerslake. He's getting lots of comments today, isn't he? He went on to tell us the names of this board and give a brief CV of their background and involvements in various combined authorities around the country. There was also some discussion later on regarding the draft statements of accounts and government statements. It was written in our reports that this is late being signed off due to the fact that Ernst & Young do not currently have enough cover to complete the audit, allowing final sign-off. This was disputed by Ernst & Young's representative at the meeting, and it was pointed out that due to the CPCA's constitution, certain elements could only be signed off by the mayor and not by a deputy, thus holding off the process. As previously stated, much time is spent housekeeping. There are also so many new measures being implemented with regards to improvements we're not only going over the wording used of both the measures, but also the way that the results are shown, highlighting the risks along the way. The general feel is that there is an expectation that things are moving forwards in a positive manner, but as ever, Ernst & Young would not be drawn to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? I'm going to say that as a no, so you're fine. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 13, outcomes from committees and panels. This is an opportunity for members to raise any issues or ask questions arising from recent meetings of the council's committees and panels. Do we have any questions arising from recent meetings? And can I just say that the same rules apply in terms of questions as stated previously? Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is for the Chair of the Corporate Governance Committee. As Huntingdonshire District Council enters a new era of a more active opposition, and looking at some of the recent confusion caused in some of the processes of committees and the lack of procedures around how the council deals with motions and amendments, can I ask the Chairman of the Corporate Governance Committee to call for a review of the council's constitution, in doing so creating a formal structure for a shadow cabinet, providing clarity on how the council scrutinises the administration and setting out how to deal with motions and amendments.
Thank you for your question. It's holding up here. Yeah, obviously, I hopefully wouldn't really expect me to respond to that straight away, but I'm quite happy to take that away and review it with colleagues. Thank you.
Any further questions? Nope. Okay. Item 14, committees and panels. Can I invite group leaders to report on any variations to memberships of committees and panels if necessary? So, Councillor Combs.
Thank you. No variance, but 14B will need to be addressed.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, nothing from yourself. Thank you. So Councillor Julie Kerr, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel for Customers and Partnerships, will now present a recommendation for a proposed change to the name of the panel.
Good evening. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel, Customers and Partnerships panel would like to request a change be made to the panel name to better reflect the roles and remits of the panel and the needs of the district. Proposed panel name is Overview and Scrutiny, Environment, Communities and Partnerships. This amendment was discussed at the last meeting of the panel and all were in favour of this change, and I would like to put this proposal to the council.
Thank you. Do we have any objections? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you. It's not an objection to the change of name in principle, but to the procedure. And this highlights the point that Councillor Martin was making in his previous question. We really ought to have a proper constitutional process for doing this sort of thing. And this should be part of what is.
Sorry, your microphone has...
Sorry, this is not something that should be bounced on council at the end of the meeting when we've been going for nearly 3 hours. And as I say, it's not a reflection on the proposal to change the name, but I do think that it highlights the deficiency in our procedures.
Thank you. Do we have any objections? No. Yeah. So as a proposal, can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hunt. And for those all in favour, please. Anyone against? We have one. And any abstentions, please? No. It's carried. Thank you. So that brings And with that, can I thank you all for your attendance and contributions and bearing with us with the technical issues that we faced this evening. Can I also just take this opportunity to wish you all a safe and peaceful Christmas and a Happy New Year? And I now declare the meeting is closed.